It was supposed to be the adventure of a lifetime, a graduation gift that 16-year-old Emma Rodriguez from Colorado would remember forever. But what happened on that scorching afternoon in the Serengeti would change her life in ways that no one could have predicted and would spark a global conversation about animal intelligence, survival instincts, and the mysterious connections that can form between humans and wild predators in moments of absolute desperation. Before I tell you this absolutely jaw-dropping true story that made international headlines and left wildlife experts completely baffled, I need you to do something for me right now. Drop a comment below telling me what city or country you're watching this video from, because I absolutely love knowing where my amazing viewers are tuning in from all around the world. And while you're down there in the comment section, make sure you hit that subscribe button and smash that notification bell so you never miss another incredible story like this one. And go ahead and crush that like button, because I promise you, this story is going to take you on an emotional roller coaster that you will never forget. This is one of those rare true accounts that will make you question everything you thought you knew about wild animals and human survival. So stay with me through every single moment, because what happens is absolutely extraordinary, and you definitely don't want to miss any detail of this remarkable tale. Rodriguez was not your typical teenager obsessed with social media and shopping malls. She was an adventurous young woman who had been fascinated by wildlife since she was old enough to watch nature documentaries with her father, a high school biology teacher in Boulder, who had instilled in her a deep respect and curiosity about the natural world from an early age. When her parents asked her what she wanted for her 16th birthday and high school graduation present, having completed her diploma a year early due to her academic excellence, Emma didn't hesitate for a second. She wanted to go on a real African safari, not one of those luxury lodge experiences where you watched animals from air-conditioned vehicles while sipping champagne, but a genuine wilderness camping safari where you could feel the earth beneath your feet and fall asleep to the sounds of lions roaring in the distance. Her parents, Maria and Carlos Rodriguez, had saved for years to make this dream possible, and, in July, they found themselves on a small group safari in Tanzania's Serengeti National Park, accompanied by an experienced guide named Joseph Kimathi, who had been leading safaris for over 20 years and knew the land and its animals as well as anyone possibly could. The group consisted of 12 people, including the Rodriguez family, a retired couple from Australia celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary, 2 young newlyweds from Germany on their honeymoon, a solo traveler from Japan, who was a professional wildlife photographer, and 3 friends from the UK, who were taking a gap year before university. Joseph had organized a 5-day walking safari through a relatively remote section of the park where vehicle access was limited, and where, if you were lucky and respectful of the wildlife, you could experience Africa in a way that few modern tourists ever get to see. The plan for their 3rd day was to hike approximately 8 kilometers from their current camp to a new site, near a seasonal river where large herds of wildebeest and zebra gathered during their migration, and where predators including lions, hyenas, and leopards followed the herds in hopes of picking off weak or young animals. Joseph had briefed the group extensively on safety protocols, the most important being to stay together at all times, never wander off alone, make noise while walking to avoid surprising, dangerous animals, and always listen immediately to any instructions he gave, because in the African wilderness, hesitation could mean the difference between life and death. The morning started perfectly, with the group setting off just after sunrise when the temperature was still bearable and the animals were most active. Emma was in her element, her camera constantly clicking as she photographed everything from tiny dung beetles rolling their precious cargo across the dusty ground to massive elephant bulls drinking at a muddy waterhole, their tusks gleaming white in the early morning sun. She walked near the front of the group, just behind Joseph, peppering him with questions about animal behavior, tracking techniques, and the delicate ecosystem that sustained this incredible diversity of life. Joseph, who had raised 3 daughters of his own, enjoyed Emma's enthusiasm and genuine interest, so different from many tourists who seemed more interested in getting the perfect Instagram photo than actually understanding or appreciating the natural world they were privileged to witness. Around mid-morning, the group stopped for a water break in the shade of a massive acacia tree, and Joseph pointed out fresh leopard tracks in the soft earth nearby, explaining that a large cat, probably male based on the size of the paw prints, had passed through this area within the past few hours, likely heading toward the rocky outcrops visible in the distance, where leopards often rested during the heat of the day. After the break, they continued their trek, and it was here that the series of small decisions and unfortunate coincidences began that would lead to Emma's separation from the group. She had noticed what she thought was a rare bird, possibly a lilac-breasted roller based on the flash of brilliant blue she had glimpsed, perched in a tree about 30 meters off the trail, and she wanted to get a better photograph. Emma knew she shouldn't leave the group. Joseph had been absolutely clear about that rule. But the bird was so close, she could see it clearly, and she would only be gone for a minute or two, just long enough to get a few good shots. She glanced ahead and saw that the group had paused again, this time to observe a family of warthogs with adorable piglets, and everyone's attention was focused on the comical-looking animals as they trotted along with their tails held straight up like antennas. Emma made her decision, a decision that thousands of teenagers make every day when they think rules don't really apply to them, or that nothing bad will actually happen. And she quietly slipped away from the group, moving quickly toward the tree where she had seen the bird. The bird, as it turned out, was exactly what Emma had hoped, a magnificent lilac-breasted roller in perfect lighting, and she spent several minutes photographing it from different angles, so absorbed in getting the perfect shot that she didn't notice the group had started moving again. By the time she turned around to rejoin them, pleased with her photos and already imagining posting them online, the group was nowhere to be seen. The trail, which had seemed so obvious when she left it, now looked like dozens of other game trails crisscrossing the landscape. And Emma felt the first flutter of real fear in her chest. She called out, not too loudly at first, because she didn't want to seem foolish or get in trouble for leaving the group, but loud enough that she thought someone should hear her. There was no response except the buzz of insects and the distant call of a go-away bird, its harsh warning cry seeming almost mocking in the circumstances. Emma tried to retrace her steps, but in the flat terrain covered with yellow grass and scattered acacia trees, everything looked the same, and within minutes she had completely lost her bearings. The fear that had been a flutter now became a solid weight in Emma's stomach as she realized the full gravity of her situation. She was alone in the Serengeti, one of the most dangerous wildlife areas on Earth, with no water beyond the single bottle in her small pack, no food except an energy bar, no shelter, and worst of all, no real idea which direction to go to find either her group or the camp they had left that morning. The sun was climbing higher, the temperature already approaching 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and Emma knew from her biology classes and nature documentaries that people could die of dehydration in the African heat within a day or two, and that was assuming they weren't killed first by lions, hyenas, elephants, buffalo, or any of the other animals that could view a lone human as either a threat or prey. She forced herself to think logically, to remember what she had learned, and she decided that her best bet was to find high ground where she might be able to see landmarks and get her bearings, and where she would be more visible to any search parties that would surely be looking for her once the group realized she was missing. Emma started walking toward a rocky outcrop she could see perhaps a kilometer away, conserving her water and trying to make noise as she walked by, singing songs from her favorite musicals, the sound of her own voice providing small comfort in the vast emptiness of the savannah. She had been walking for perhaps 20 minutes, the rocks seeming to get no closer despite her steady pace, when she heard a sound that made every hair on her body stand on end. It was a low, sawing cough that she recognized immediately from nature documentaries, the vocalization of a leopard, and it was close, very close, probably no more than 50 meters away based on the clarity of the sound. Emma froze, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst from her chest, and she slowly turned her head, scanning the landscape for any sign of the big cat. Leopards were ambush hunters, she knew that. They stalked their prey silently and launched their attacks from close range, often from trees or high rocks, and they were perfectly capable of killing animals much larger than a teenage girl. Then she saw it, and the sight was both terrifying and magnificent in equal measure. Perched on a flat rock about 40 meters away, in a spot where it had probably been watching her approach for several minutes, was a male leopard, and he was enormous, easily 200 pounds of pure muscle and predatory power. His coat was a stunning pattern of gold and yellow covered in rosettes of black spots, and his eyes, those amber gold eyes that seemed to look directly into Emma's soul, were fixed on her with an intensity that made her bladder threaten to let go. The leopard's tail swished slowly back and forth, and Emma remembered reading that this could indicate either agitation or hunting focus, neither of which was particularly comforting in her current situation. She knew she shouldn't run. Running would trigger the cat's chase instinct, and she would be dead before she made it 10 meters. But she also knew that standing still and staring at a predator could be interpreted as a challenge. She tried to remember what Joseph had told them about wildlife encounters, something about making yourself appear large and backing away slowly while avoiding direct eye contact, but her mind was blank with terror, and all she could do was stand there, shaking, tears streaming down her face, waiting for the attack that seemed inevitable. But the attack didn't come. The leopard continued to watch her, but he made no move to descend from his rock, made no crouching motion that would indicate an imminent charge, just watched with what Emma, in her terrified state, could only describe as curiosity. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours, and gradually Emma's rational mind began to reassert itself over her panic. If the leopard had wanted to kill her, he would have done it already. Leopards didn't hesitate or play with their prey the way house cats might. They were efficient killers who struck fast and dragged their victims up into trees to eat at leisure. So why was this cat just watching her? Emma slowly, so slowly that each movement felt like it took forever, lowered herself to sit on the ground, making herself smaller and less threatening, and she broke eye contact with the leopard, looking down at the ground while keeping the cat in her peripheral vision. She had no idea if this was the right thing to do, but standing frozen in fear indefinitely wasn't going to help her situation, and she was already feeling the effects of the heat and her terror-induced adrenaline crash. If you're watching this and you can't believe what you're hearing, make sure you've hit that subscribe button and turned on notifications, because this story gets even more incredible. And don't forget to leave a like and tell me in the comments what you would do if you were in Emma's situation, Would you panic? Or would you try to stay calm like she did? I want to know your thoughts, and keep watching, because what happens next absolutely shocked the wildlife experts who later studied this case and forced them to completely rethink their understanding of leopard behavior and intelligence. Emma sat there in the dirt and grass, her body shaking from adrenaline and heat, occasionally sipping tiny amounts of water from her bottle to keep her mouth from becoming completely dry. And the leopard sat on his rock, watching her with those unblinking amber eyes. An hour passed, then 2, and the sun climbed higher until it was directly overhead, beating down with punishing intensity that made Emma's head throb and her vision blur at the edges. She knew she needed to find shelter, shade, somewhere to escape the brutal heat that was now as dangerous as the predator watching her. But she was terrified that any movement would trigger an attack. It was the leopard who moved first, standing and stretching in that liquid way cats have, his muscles rippling under his spotted coat, and Emma's breath caught in her throat as she prepared for the end. But instead of attacking, the leopard simply jumped down from his rock and began walking, not toward Emma, but parallel to her position. And after perhaps 20 paces, he stopped and looked back at her, then continued walking a few more steps before stopping and looking back again. Emma, delirious from heat and fear and the surreal nature of her situation, felt a crazy thought enter her mind. Was the leopard trying to get her to follow him? It was impossible, absurd, the kind of thing that happened in children's stories but not in real life. And yet the cat's behavior was so deliberate, so purposeful, that she couldn't shake the feeling that he was communicating something. She slowly got to her feet, swaying slightly from dehydration and exhaustion, and took a tentative step in the direction the leopard had gone. The cat immediately started walking again, maintaining that same distance of about 20 meters, occasionally glancing back to ensure Emma was following. She had no rational explanation for why she was following a predator that could kill her. Maybe it was heat stroke causing her to hallucinate or make terrible decisions. Maybe it was some instinct that recognized that the cat had had multiple opportunities to attack and hadn't. Maybe it was simply that she had no better options and was going to die out here anyway. So she might as well die trying something rather than just sitting and waiting for the end. They walked like this for perhaps 30 minutes, the strangest procession that had probably ever crossed this section of the Serengeti. A teenage girl from Colorado following a wild leopard across the African savanna. And gradually Emma realized they were moving toward a line of green vegetation that indicated water. The leopard led her to a small stream, barely more than a trickle but precious nonetheless. And he stopped at the water's edge and drank, his pink tongue lapping at the clear water. Emma approached carefully, knelt upstream from the cat, and refilled her water bottle, her hands shaking so badly she spilled half of it. She drank deeply, the warm water tasting better than anything she had ever consumed, and she used some to wet her shirt and cool her overheated skin. The leopard finished drinking and moved a short distance away, settling in the shade of an acacia tree, and Emma, emboldened by thirst, satisfied and temperature lowered, found her own shady spot about 15 meters from the cat and sat down to rest. As the afternoon wore on and Emma's mind cleared from the fog of dehydration and panic, she began to really observe the leopard, and she noticed things that her terror had prevented her from seeing before. The cat's left front paw seemed to be favoring the right, and when he shifted position, she saw that the left paw was swollen, possibly injured, maybe from a failed hunt or a territorial fight with another leopard. The cat was also thinner than he should be, his ribs slightly visible under his coat, suggesting he hadn't eaten well in several days. An injured paw would make hunting difficult for a leopard, and Emma found herself feeling an absurd pity for this predator who could kill her in seconds. She also noticed that the cat's behavior toward her had been consistent from the beginning. He was watching her the way a wildlife guide might watch a tourist, with alert awareness but not aggression, maintaining distance but also ensuring she didn't get into further trouble. And the more she observed him, the more convinced she became that he had deliberately led her to water, and now was, in some inexplicable way, guarding her while she rested. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon when Emma heard the most beautiful sound she had ever heard in her life: the distant throb of a helicopter engine. She jumped to her feet, waving her arms and shouting, even though she knew they couldn't possibly hear her from the ground, and she saw the leopard stand as well, his ears pricked forward, body tense at the unfamiliar sound. The helicopter was searching in a grid pattern, and Emma realized with sinking heart that they were too far away. The helicopter would pass over the next ridge and never see her. But then the leopard did something that Emma would spend the rest of her life trying to understand. He moved away from the shade into the open ground, his spotted coat standing out against the pale grass, and he stood there, perfectly visible from the air, not running, or hiding the way a wild animal normally would from the terrifying noise of a helicopter, just standing there as if he knew that being seen was important. The helicopter banked and began moving in their direction, having spotted either the leopard or Emma or both, and within minutes it was hovering overhead, the downwash from its rotors creating a dust storm that made both girl and cat turn away. A figure in the helicopter was pointing and speaking into a radio, and Emma knew they had seen her, knew she was going to be rescued, and she collapsed to her knees, sobbing with relief. The helicopter moved off a short distance and landed, unable to set down any closer due to the terrain and trees, and Emma saw figures running toward her, Joseph leading the group with her parents close behind. She got to her feet and started running toward them, and it was only after she had gone several steps that she thought to look back at the leopard. He was retreating toward the rocky outcrops in the distance, moving in that smooth, flowing gait that made it look like he was floating rather than running. And just before he disappeared into a crevice between two large boulders, he stopped and looked back at her one final time, and Emma raised her hand in a wave that felt completely inadequate, but was all she could offer to the mysterious cat, who had, for reasons she would never fully understand, chosen to help rather than harm her. The reunion with her parents was tearful and chaotic, with Maria clutching Emma so tightly she could barely breathe, while Carlos kept touching her face and arms as if to confirm she was really there and unharmed. And Joseph was simultaneously relieved and shaken, his professional reputation and personal conscience both having been on the line during the hours of searching for the lost teenager. Emma tried to tell them about the leopard, about how he had led her to water and stayed with her and seemingly made himself visible to the helicopter, but in the chaos of the moment, and in her exhausted, dehydrated state, her words came out jumbled and unclear. It wasn't until later that evening, back at the safari camp after she had been checked by a doctor who flew in from Arusha, after she had rehydrated and eaten and slept for several hours, that Emma was able to tell her story coherently to her parents, Joseph and several park rangers who had assisted in the search. She showed them the photos on her camera, the timestamps proving when she had separated from the group and the sequence of her ordeal. Though she had been too terrified to photograph the leopard during most of their encounter, she had managed a few shots when he was drinking at the stream, distant and somewhat blurry, but clearly showing the distinctive rosette pattern that would allow researchers to identify this specific individual if he was ever spotted again. The story of Emma's survival and her incredible claim about the helpful leopard might have remained just another safari tale, something to tell friends back home that would be met with skeptical smiles, except that the helicopter crew confirmed several key details. They had indeed first spotted the leopard, whose coat standing out in open ground in the late afternoon light had caught the observers' attention, and they had then seen Emma very close to the same location, and the pilot, who had flown search and rescue missions for 20 years, stated unequivocally that in his experience wild leopards did not remain in open ground when helicopters approached. They ran for cover immediately. Yet this cat had stood there long enough to be clearly spotted before finally retreating. Joseph, who knew the territories of several leopards in this section of the park, believed based on Emma's description and the photographs that this was a cat they called Ghost, a large male around 8 years old who had been unusually tolerant of safari vehicles and had occasionally been observed at closer range than most leopards would allow, suggesting an individual who had perhaps learned that not all humans were threats. The rangers also confirmed that a leopard with an injured paw would have difficulty hunting and might be drawn to areas where humans were present in hopes of scavenging, though none of them could explain why such a cat would lead a human to water rather than simply avoiding her, or, if he was desperate enough, viewing her as potential prey. Emma's story was picked up by local news in Tanzania, then by international media, and within a week she was being interviewed by news programs around the world. Wildlife magazines wanted her photos and her account, and conservation organizations saw an opportunity to highlight both the intelligence of leopards and the importance of protecting their habitat. Scientists who studied big cat behavior were divided, some dismissing the entire account as either exaggeration, born of trauma and dehydration, or pure coincidence. The leopard simply happening to be moving toward water when Emma encountered him, and she, in her distressed state, interpreting his movements as deliberate guidance. Others pointed to the growing body of research showing that many animals, including solitary predators like leopards, possessed far more complex cognitive abilities than previously believed, including theory of mind, the ability to understand that other beings have thoughts and needs different from their own, and that an injured leopard, who had learned that humans in this protected area were not dangerous, might indeed make a calculated decision that leading this lost human to safety would result in the noisy helicopters and vehicles going away sooner, allowing him to return to hunting when his paw healed. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a wildlife behaviorist from Oxford University who had been studying Serengeti leopards for 15 years, traveled to Tanzania specifically to investigate Emma's claims, and she spent 3 weeks in the area with her research team using camera traps, tracking equipment, and many hours of patient observation trying to locate and document the leopard called Ghost. They were successful, identifying him by his unique rosette pattern and confirming that he did indeed have an injured left front paw that was healing but still caused a noticeable limp. Dr. Mitchell observed Ghost for extended periods and noted that his behavior was unusual for a leopard. He showed relatively little fear of vehicles and would occasionally watch safari groups from a visible perch rather than slinking away unseen, behavior that suggested either a genetic predisposition toward boldness or significant learning from experience. She stopped short of definitively stating that Ghost had deliberately helped Emma, scientific caution preventing such a conclusion without more evidence. But she did publish a paper titled Flexible Cognitive Strategies in Solitary Predators, a case study of human-leopard interaction that detailed the incident and argued that it warranted serious consideration and further research rather than dismissal. The case became famous in wildlife behavioral circles and was debated at conferences and in academic journals for years afterward, with Ghost becoming one of the most studied individual leopards in Africa, his movements tracked, his behavior documented, his life history pieced together from years of scat analysis, camera trap photos, and direct observation. It was determined that Ghost had been born in the park to a mother who had also been unusually tolerant of safari vehicles, suggesting that this behavioral trait might have a learned or genetic component that was passed from parent to offspring. Ghost went on to live another 6 years after his encounter with Emma, successfully hunting despite his healed but permanently slightly arthritic paw, fathering multiple litters with different females, and maintaining a territory that overlapped with popular safari routes where he was regularly photographed by tourists who learned to recognize him from the distinctive pattern of rosettes on his left shoulder that looked remarkably like a sideways letter E, which some imaginative people claimed stood for Emma, though in reality, rosette patterns were random, and this was simply coincidence. Emma Rodriguez completed high school and went on to study wildlife biology at Colorado State University, her experience in the Serengeti having cemented her determination to dedicate her life to understanding and protecting wild animals. She returned to Tanzania several times during her college years, volunteering with conservation organizations and working with Dr. Mitchell's research team. And she was there when Ghost was found dead at the age of 14, ancient for a wild leopard, having apparently died peacefully in a rocky den not far from where he had encountered Emma 7 years earlier. Emma was among the researchers who performed the necropsy and collected samples for the ongoing study of leopard genetics and behavior, and she kept one of Ghost's whiskers preserved and mounted in a small frame on her desk, a reminder of the day when a wild predator chose to help rather than harm, when instinct was overridden by something more complex, when the boundary between human and animal blurred in a way that still made her question everything she thought she understood about consciousness, intelligence, and the mysterious bonds that can form between completely different species. If this incredible story has moved you or made you think differently about wild animals and their capacity for complex behavior and even compassion, do me a huge favor right now and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Hit that like button to help this video reach more people who need to hear this message about the intelligence and emotional depth of animals. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel with the notification bell turned on, because I regularly share true stories like this that challenge our assumptions and remind us why wildlife conservation is so important. And share this video with everyone you know, because stories like Emma and Ghost need to be told and retold. They change how we see other species and ultimately how we treat them and the wild places they call home. The legacy of Emma's encounter with Ghost extends far beyond the scientific papers and conference presentations it inspired. The story became part of conservation education programs in Tanzania and internationally, teaching people, especially young people, that wild animals are not simply dangerous threats to be feared or resources to be exploited, but complex individuals with their own personalities, preferences, and the capacity to make decisions based on circumstances and learning. The incident was credited with significantly increasing tourism to this section of the Serengeti, bringing revenue that supported conservation efforts and local communities, and several leopards in the area became individually famous, with tourists hoping to catch a glimpse of Ghost's descendants who still roamed the same territory their father had defended. A documentary film crew spent 2 years creating Ghost the Leopard Who Understood, which aired on National Geographic and won several awards for wildlife filmmaking, combining Emma's account with footage of Ghost and other Serengeti leopards, expert interviews, and broader discussions of animal cognition and conservation challenges. Years later, Emma, now Dr. Emma Rodriguez with a PhD in wildlife behavioral ecology, returned to give a TEDx talk about her experience and her message resonated far beyond the scientific community, reaching millions of people through social media and inspiring a new generation to care about wildlife conservation. She spoke about the danger of anthropomorphizing animals, of projecting human emotions and motivations onto creatures that experience the world in fundamentally different ways, but she also argued passionately against the opposite error of assuming that animals are simple automatons without inner lives, emotions, or the capacity for flexible decision-making in novel situations. She pointed out that Ghost had hundreds of opportunities throughout his life to attack humans who were much more vulnerable than Emma had been. Tourists who stood outside their vehicles to photograph him, guides who tracked him on foot, researchers who set camera traps in his territory, yet he never harmed any of them, suggesting a learned understanding that these particular humans in this protected space were not threats, and that coexistence was more advantageous than conflict. Emma's story and the ongoing research it inspired contributed to a broader shift in how scientists and conservationists thought about wildlife management and human-animal conflict. The traditional approach of strictly separating humans and dangerous predators, based on the assumption that such animals would always pose a threat to people, began to give way to more nuanced strategies that recognized individual variation in animal behavior and the potential for certain individuals or populations to learn to coexist peacefully with humans when circumstances allowed. This didn't mean allowing dangerous wildlife in places where people lived or encouraging tourists to approach predators, but it did mean recognizing that blanket policies might not be as effective as situation-specific approaches that took into account the learning, personality, and history of individual animals. The final chapter of this remarkable story came full circle in a way that seemed almost scripted, but was simply one of those strange coincidences that sometimes happen in real life. Emma was leading her own research team in the Serengeti, studying mother-cub relationships in leopards and how females teach their young about humans and vehicles in a protected area, when they observed something extraordinary. A young female leopard, identified through genetic testing as one of Ghost's granddaughters, was teaching her 3 small cubs how to behave around safari vehicles, and rather than avoiding humans entirely or showing aggression, she demonstrated a measured approach, staying alert but not fleeing, maintaining distance but not hiding, showing her cubs that these particular humans could be tolerated. The cubs, including one young male who had rosettes on his left shoulder that bore a striking resemblance to his grandfather's distinctive pattern, were learning their mother's lessons, and Emma found herself watching a generational transmission of tolerance and coexistence that Ghost might have started with his own offspring decades earlier. This story, this absolutely true account of a teenage girl and a leopard who defied expectations and forged a connection in the most unlikely circumstances, reminds us of several profound truths about the world we share with wildlife. It reminds us that individual animals, like individual humans, vary enormously in personality, intelligence, and behavioral flexibility, and that blanket assumptions about species often fail to account for this variation. It reminds us that intelligence and emotional complexity exist far more widely in the animal kingdom than we often acknowledge, and that the line between human and animal cognition is blurrier and more permeable than we like to think. It reminds us that conservation is not just about preserving numbers of animals or acres of habitat, though those things are crucial, but about protecting the complex relationships, the learned behaviors, the cultural transmissions that occur within animal populations, and sometimes even between species. Most importantly, it reminds us that every individual creature, whether human or leopard, carries within them the capacity for choices that can echo across time, affecting lives and shaping futures in ways we cannot predict or control. Before I close, I want you to take a moment to think about what this story means for how you see wildlife and conservation. Emma's encounter with Ghost didn't happen because she was special or because the leopard was tame. It happened because circumstances aligned in an unusual way, and both human and animal made choices. Emma choosing to stay calm rather than panic. Ghost choosing tolerance over aggression. Both of them navigating an impossible situation and emerging safely because of decisions that went against instinct and training. That capacity for choice, for flexible response to novel situations, for behavior that serves long-term benefit over immediate reaction. That's what intelligence looks like across species, and recognizing it in animals obligates us to treat them with the respect and protection such intelligence deserves. So leave a comment telling me what you think about this incredible story. Give this video a thumbs up to help spread this message, subscribe to this channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another amazing true story like this one. And share this video everywhere because stories like Emma and Ghost change minds and hearts, and that's where real conservation begins. In the moment when we stop seeing animals as things and start recognizing them as fellow conscious beings sharing this planet with us. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. And remember that every choice we make, every action we take toward understanding and protecting wildlife creates ripples that extend far beyond what we can see. Just like a single leopard's choice to help a lost teenager created waves that are still spreading through conservation efforts and changing minds around the world.